A team of archaeologists at the University of Oregon have found one of North America's oldest human-occupied sites in southern Oregon.
For decades, many believed Clovis hunters reached the continent around 13,000 years ago through a frozen land bridge. But deep inside Oregon's caves, ancient DNA, stone tools, and preserved evidence suggest a much older story. These discoveries challenge the traditional timeline and raise a haunting question. Were people living in North America long before Clovis? If true, this hidden cave could rewrite the history of human migration forever. The Oregon Cave Breakthrough. Deep in the dry, quiet caves of south-central Oregon, a discovery emerged that no one saw coming. Archaeologists from the University of Oregon were excavating a site known as Paisley Caves when they uncovered something extraordinary, something that defied the established understanding of when humans first arrived in North America. It wasn't an ancient spear or a familiar tool. The pivotal find was far more enigmatic and far-reaching in its implications. Multiple tests pointed to an age that was thousands of years older than the accepted timeline. This discovery shook the foundation of archaeology as it stood. For decades, Paisley Caves had been on the radar, but overlooked. Researchers knew it existed, but had never dug deep enough to uncover the secrets hidden beneath its layers. When they finally did, the evidence inside pushed back the clock of human presence significantly. The initial dating results seemed impossible, so they repeated the tests on separate samples using different machines. Consistently, the results told the same story. Humans were in North America long before what textbooks claimed. What made their findings even more compelling was what lay alongside the dates. Instead of stone weapons, the archaeologists found fragments of ancient human waste, preserved and hardened over the vast expanse of time. This wasn't just dirt or debris. It was a biological time capsule containing DNA, an organic record untouched by modern contamination. The arid atmosphere in the cave had preserved this fragile evidence in a way no traditional artifact could be preserved. The ancient feces carried clues that stone tools never could, specifically mitochondrial DNA that revealed a direct genetic line to modern Native American peoples. This direct link erased any thoughts that early inhabitants were from lost or failed migrations. These were the ancestors of people living today, families connected through thousands of years to a single place most of the world had never heard of. The implications were profound and personal, yet the timeline was the most stunning part. Accelerator mass spectrometry, a highly precise dating technique, showed these remains to be over 14,000 years old. That's at least 1,000 years earlier than the supposed arrival of the well-known Clovis culture, which had long been accepted as the continent's first human presence. Suddenly, the Clovis culture was no longer the first. It was simply one chapter in a much larger and older story. The more the researchers dug, the more they realized they were not just rewriting a chapter, they were dismantling an entire book. This moment in Oregon was not an isolated anomaly. It was the spark that ignited heated debates and forced archaeologists worldwide to reconsider established timelines. The old narrative, comfortable and black and white, was crumbling in the face of new, undeniable evidence. This discovery also opened the door to other overlooked and underexplored sites. If humans had been in Oregon at such an early date, then where else might the footprints of these ancient travelers be found? Paisley Caves was a warning. Many details of human history might still be buried, waiting to reveal surprises. The story of human arrival in America was clearly more complex and intriguing than anyone had imagined. But while the Paisley Caves were rewriting history, the most startling revelations were still to come. The layers of truth buried beneath the soil of Oregon, New Mexico, and California would push those timelines further back, forcing us to confront a history millions of years in the making, far beyond what any textbook had dared to entertain. As the dust settled over Paisley, it became clear that the history of North America's first inhabitants was no neat narrative, but a sprawling mosaic with puzzles still waiting to be solved. The story that once ended with Clovis people had more chapters hidden beneath the earth, ready to reveal themselves. Transitioning from what Oregon revealed, it is important to understand where this discovery challenged the most long-held beliefs about America's first humans and their origins. The Clovis First Paradigm. For much of the 20th century, the account of how humans arrived in North America was pretty straightforward, and it was widely accepted. It sort of centered on the Clovis culture, hunter-gatherers, named after their signature stone implements found near Clovis, New Mexico. The artifacts had a very recognizable fluted style, and it gave them a lighter feel, while also being deadly effective as spear points. In that old narrative, the idea was that these capable hunters crossed into North America from Asia roughly 13,000 years back over the Bering Land Bridge. And honestly, for a long while, that version just stuck. The model sounded pretty elegant and simple. During the last ice age, lower sea levels basically exposed a frozen corridor between Siberia and Alaska. The Clovis people then kind of followed this natural passage, migrating south through an ice-free corridor, and after that spreading quickly across the continent. Their unique technology and small objects were treated as the earliest, and also the clearest, proof that humans were on the continent. Textbooks, documentaries, and a lot of scholars kept pushing this timeline for decades, like it was settled already. That version of history wasn't only accepted, it was sort of fiercely defended. And yes, people kept investing whole careers into proving the Clovis first idea. Many archaeologists were skeptical or openly dismissive when any competing evidence showed up. If scholars questioned the timeline, they were often met with pushback because rewriting the story meant overturning established know-how, plus shifting whole academic paradigms, which sounds dramatic, but yeah. In practice, it became the accepted truth, a textbook certainty. Still, even with all that dominance, the model had these little cracks. Older artifacts and sites would sometimes appear that just didn't match the narrative at all. A few discoveries suggested humans might have been here before the Clovis era, but those ideas were usually met with skepticism or the old sample contamination accusations. In many cases, these findings got ignored or sidelined under the label Clovis primacy syndrome, meaning if something contradicted the timeline, it was treated as a strange exception, an anomaly, not actual evidence. Yet over time, the pile of contradictory evidence just kept growing, bigger in volume and somehow also in credibility. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, which was dug starting in the 1970s, came up with dates that pointed to human presence roughly 15 to 19,000 years ago, so well before Clovis. Slowly but surely, discoveries like that began to chip away at the once very rigid model, even if a bunch of controversy still hovered around them. Not everybody in archaeology agreed, and the debates about methods and what the findings actually meant kept going. The so-called Clovis first model was more than a simple line on a timeline. It was kind of a worldview too, where peoples arrived only by land, pushing across a frozen bridge and then spreading in a gradual way through the New World. It turned early American history into something like one big event, a major migration plus a cultural burst, leaving very little space for a messier mosaic of movement patterns and different timelines. Then, as evidence from Oregon's Paisley Caves and several other places started to look too solid to dismiss, scholars couldn't really stay comfortable ignoring the complexity around America's earliest settlers. The Clovis first dogma was basically under attack, and a newer understanding of prehistoric migrations started to take shape, one that accepts multiple waves, different peoples, and routes that nobody really predicted in advance. This unraveling of the old story set the stage for the real breakthrough, the discovery of human DNA preserved in the unlikeliest of places. Transitioning from understanding how entrenched the Clovis first model was, the next discovery cracked it wide open through a remarkable source that stone tools alone could never provide: ancient human DNA. DNA in ancient waste. One of the most surprising breakthroughs at Paisley Caves wasn't a tool or a weapon, but preserved human waste, the last place anyone expected to find answers. In the dry cave air, fragments of ancient feces hardened and dried, surviving for over 14,000 years. These preserved deposits became biological time capsules containing untapped genetic evidence from people who lived long before the Clovis culture arrived. The dry conditions were crucial. They preserved fragile organic material that would have decomposed elsewhere. Unlike bones or stone tools, this material provided direct access to mitochondrial DNA, a genetic marker passed down from mother to child. Scientists could extract and sequence this DNA, offering a direct genetic fingerprint from ancient inhabitants without contamination from modern humans. The mitochondrial DNA they found matched two specific haplogroups, A2 and B2, known to be founding lineages of Native American populations. This was key evidence linking these ancient individuals directly to the ancestors of present-day indigenous peoples. It wasn't a lost or vanished group. They were the very people whose descendants still walk the land today. Importantly, genetic evidence like this refused to fit the earlier models based purely on tools and artifacts. It showed a continuity of human presence stretching back thousands of years earlier than the Clovis timeline suggested. The presence of these haplogroups reversed assumptions that the earliest migrations were isolated or failed attempts. Instead, they were the roots of living cultures. Dating this genetic material required precision, and researchers employed accelerator mass spectrometry to measure the age of the organic waste itself, independently of surrounding artifacts or soil. Every test, repeated and calibrated, consistently dated the samples to more than 14,000 years old. This was strong, direct evidence placing humans on the continent significantly before the accepted timeline. The presence of this ancient genetic trail raised profound questions about the migration routes, timing, and lifestyles of early Americans. How did these ancestors arrive? What paths did they take? What cultures did they develop before the widespread emergence of Clovis technologies? This DNA evidence added depth and humanity to the archaeological record. More than just confirming earlier arrivals, this discovery shattered the neat narrative of an exclusive Clovis first arrival. It expanded the story to include a broader range of peoples with deep genetic ties and long histories that spanned the continent. The evidence demanded a reconsideration of how early humans lived, moved, and adapted in North America. As genetic science met archaeology in the dusty depths of Oregon's caves, the puzzle pieces of American prehistory began to fit into a far more complex picture, one that we will continue to unravel as the story unfolds. With DNA rewriting the story beneath the surface, other sites with physical evidence would push the timeline back even more dramatically. Rimrock draws volcanic clock. About 70 miles from Paisley Caves, there's another remarkable place that kind of deepened the mystery of early human presence in North America. Rimrock Draw, a rock shelter not far from Riley, Oregon, has been sitting there quietly holding prehistoric secrets for years. Archaeologists, led by Dr. Patrick O'Grady, have been excavating since 2011 and bit by bit uncovering stone implements, animal remains, and volcanic ash layers that together sketch a story far older than anyone expected. And unlike Paisley, Rimrock Draw didn't give DNA, not exactly. Instead, it offered a tangible timeline, pressed into the earth itself, like nature's own clock, ticking without asking permission. The most important clue showed up as a layer of pale white ash, buried in the soil. Scientists matched this ash to fallout from a particular eruption of Mount St. Helens. They dated it precisely to somewhere between 15,400 and 15,600 years ago. That ash layer acted like a baked-in timestamp. In a sense, anything below it had to be older, while everything above was younger. So it became a natural chronological boundary, a kind of earthbound separator that helped researchers plant their findings within a dependable timescale. Underneath this volcanic marker, the team kind of stumbled on fragments of tooth enamel from animals that have been extinct for thousands of years. Among it, there were the remains of an Ice Age camel, a creature that used to roam North America, but then it disappeared long before recorded history even started. And in that very same layer, they also located teeth from Bison antiquus, the huge precursor of today's buffalo. When scientists saw these ancient animals' remnants sitting beneath that ash layer, it really startled everyone because it suggested the animals died before the ash settled, giving a solid minimum age for the artifacts sitting above. After that, in the same sort of old soil, they uncovered a stone tool that didn't really match any typical Clovis spear point. It was made from orange chalcedony, that glassy, light-catching form of agate, and the thing had several practical edges, one for cutting, another for scraping, plus a saw-toothed side that had been worn down until it turned smooth, apparently from long use. Dr. O'Grady compared it to an early Swiss Army knife, like a multifunctional tool that gets carried through time, worn by years, or even a whole lifetime of constant handling. This wasn't some quick fluke experiment either. It looked like a developed technology, refined bit by bit, and carried by one person over decades. The tool's placement mattered a lot. It lay about 10 centimeters beneath the camel tooth fragments, which implies the tool existed before those remains. In the labs, the teeth were dated to roughly between 21,000 and 22,000 years old, and that's well beyond the usual Clovis timeline. So, this pushed human presence in Oregon further back than anyone had imagined before, and it makes Rimrock Draw feel like a key site, one that forces a rethink about early habitation across North America. Facing these results, Dr. O'Grady admitted to feeling a mix of excitement and profound caution. Those old and isolated dates demand overwhelming proof to upend the established ideas. Luckily, the team produced 2 independent samples, tested separately but pointing toward the same age. This consistency added weight to the claim that humans lived in this region during the last glacial maximum, thousands of years before the so-called first Americans arrived. The stone tools uncovered here belong to what archaeologists call the Western stemmed tradition, marked by long blades, weak shoulders, and rounded bases. Their design diverges quite a bit from Clovis points, and it suggests a different cultural lineage, possibly one originating from some very different place altogether. Pinpointing these tools reshapes understanding of prehistoric technology and migratory patterns as well. Rimrock Draw doesn't only shift the timeline, it also nudges models of cultural development, migration routes, and adaptation to Ice Age environments. It suggests that diverse groups were working with distinct toolkits and surviving across North America long before the Clovis people showed up. Here, deep in Oregon's soil, the story of human history becomes richer and way more complex. As Oregon revealed remarkable layers of ancient presence beneath volcanic ash and cave floors, further south, in New Mexico's deserts, another astonishing record of ancient life was quietly waiting to be discovered. The impressions left by early humans in the dusty beds of a dried lake bed would freeze a moment in time that stretches far deeper into the continent's past. Footprints that freeze time. White Sands National Park, a vast stretch of white gypsum dunes in southern New Mexico, became the backdrop for one of the most significant discoveries in the story of human antiquity. In 2009, researchers surveyed the dried surfaces of ancient lakebeds and noticed unusual impressions pressed into the gypsum. These were not the marks of animals or geological processes, they were fossilized human footprints, preserved in exquisite detail. 61 tracks in total, left behind by groups of people walking, running, and living near an Ice Age lake known as Lake Otero. The footprints reveal incredible detail. You can see individual toes and the subtle arch of the foot. They tell a story of entire groups, including children and adults. moving across a harsh and frozen landscape. Some prints suggest a slow pace. Others show a quick, almost running stride. These were people navigating a brutal environment, captured in a single frozen instant that would remain sealed beneath layers of sediment for thousands of years. The big question was the age of these tracks. Initial radiocarbon dating in 2021 focused on seeds of a plant called spiral ditch grass found in the same sediment layer as the footprints. The results were astonishing. The footprints dated between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. This was already well before the accepted Clovis timeline, adding another stark contradiction to the conventional narrative. Skeptics emerged quickly, raising valid concerns about the possibility that groundwater contamination might have altered the carbon content of the seeds, making them appear older than they actually were. This criticism led scientists back to the site for more rigorous testing with a completely different method, this time examining conifer pollen, which is not affected by groundwater in the same way seeds are. The results came back consistent, affirming the initial date range of 21,000 to 23,000 years. In 2025, these findings gained further support through an independent study published in a leading scientific journal. Researchers analyzed 3 separate sources of organic material: pollen, seeds, and wetland mud. Each source pointed to the same time frame, consistent with the peak of the last glacial maximum. This convergence of evidence cemented the footprints' age and revolutionized understanding of early human presence in North America. Adding to the puzzle, the White Sands footprints were found alongside tracks of extinct Ice Age megafauna, including Columbian mammoths and giant ground sloths. These animals vanished thousands of years ago, yet their footprints shared the same muddy plains as humans. The proximity of these prints speaks to a shared and dangerous world, linking humans directly to the great Ice Age creatures that roamed the continent. For many archaeologists, these findings were deeply unsettling, so much so that defending this evidence carried professional risk. Accepting people were here so early means overturning decades of consensus and rewriting textbooks. But the footprints stand as a silent, immutable witness to a time when humans endured and adapted to a world vastly different from today. While White Sands pushed human occupation back tens of thousands of years, making Clovis look like the latecomer it was, even older evidence lay further west, waiting to challenge the timeline by more than 100,000 years. The footprints in New Mexico froze a moment lost to time, but other traces buried beneath California's soil hint at ancient hands shaping a history far deeper and stranger than anyone dared imagine. California's Mastodon Mystery. In Southern California, a surprising discovery kind of overturned more than a century of assumptions about human history across North America. During a routine freeway construction project, workers stumbled upon bones buried deep in the soil, like really deep. These weren't just any bones, they belonged to a mastodon, an ancient elephant-like creature that had vanished around the end of the Ice Age. What made this find extraordinary wasn't only the creature itself, but the evidence of deliberate human activity woven into the scene, almost like a clear message left behind, and at the same time, kind of easy to miss at first. The mastodon bones showed spiral fractures, twists and breaks that looked like fresh bone snapped by deliberate force, not the slow, fossil kind of change. Those breaks pointed to someone cracking the pieces open to get at the nutrient-rich marrow in the middle, basically a prized food source for prehistoric people. Near the remains, scientists also turned up big cobbles that didn't seem like they belonged there in a natural way. Geologists basically confirmed those stones were too large to have been moved by wind, water, or other natural stuff, and had likely been brought, then used by humans as hammerstones and anvils. What is kind of truly remarkable is that after all this intense processing, whoever did the ancient butchery just left, walking away and abandoning both the bones and the tools. The whole thing felt like a scene frozen in time, and it implies a human or hominin presence with the ability for tool use and more intricate behavior far earlier than people used to accept. The bones were dated using uranium-thorium radiometric analysis, a precise approach often used for old organic material. Then came the result, jaw-dropping in the end. Every test lined up, and the mastodon bones came out to about 130,000 years old. This was like a snapshot of a period when it was commonly believed that humanity was limited to Old World regions, nowhere near the Americas. The conclusions were published in a respected scientific journal, and they pushed against the central assumptions of mainstream archaeology, sparking awe and skepticism at the same time. The implications were kinda staggering. So, it seems that some group, capable of breaking bones and also using stone tools, was in North America more than 100,000 years before modern humans were supposed to have arrived. What kind of human species this was? Well, that part is unclear. They weren't modern humans, and not Neanderthals either, and their identity stays weirdly unknown, like a ghostly presence in the deep past. This kind of radical evidence has been tough for the established archaeological community to take in openly. Honestly, the whole idea threatens long-held professional beliefs and even reputations. So many people just avoid engaging with the Taruti mastodon site entirely. But still, the physical proof, shattered bones, stones, and the dating, talks loud and clear, with no real softening. And beyond the mystery and all the controversy, this discovery asks for a wider lens, one that doesn't just focus on land journeys and instead challenges those long-held assumptions about how the Americas were first populated. What if the story of human migration was even more complex, involving routes and methods previously thought impossible? Rethinking human migration routes. For decades, the dominant explanation for how the first Americans arrived was a single land route across Beringia, a frozen land bridge connecting Siberia to Alaska during the last ice age. This was considered the only viable door into the New World. From there, migrants were assumed to have spread southward, eventually giving rise to cultures like the Clovis. However, new research and discoveries have begun to challenge this linear story. Emerging evidence paints a much richer and more nuanced picture. Genetic studies focused on mitochondrial DNA reveal at least two separate waves of migration into the Americas. The first came roughly 26,000 years ago and likely traveled by sea along the Pacific coastline. These early travelers hugged shores from coastal China, moving through the islands of Japan and across the Pacific, establishing small temporary camps along rich marine environments. This coastal migration model suggests these early peoples were skilled seafarers, navigating open water by boat rather than trekking solely across frozen land. It was a slow, generational journey, dependent on abundant marine resources like fish, shellfish, and seabirds to sustain them across thousands of miles. This pathway was distinct from the later migration around 15,000 years ago, when groups entered via the Bering Land Bridge, the migration most commonly associated with Clovis-era populations. The genetic data strengthened this two-wave migration theory. It identifies mitochondrial DNA lineages linked to northern coastal China as ancestral to these early seafaring migrants, separate from the later land-based populations. This paints a picture of multiple independent journeys originating in different regions at different times, reshaping how we perceive the peopling of the Americas. What's striking is that archaeological finds across China, Japan, and North America reveal similar stone tool technologies and blade styles. These shared designs suggest cultural connections and migrations along the coastal route, reinforcing the genetic evidence. Such parallels are unlikely to be coincidences. Instead, they map a trail pointing back to coastal Asia. As new evidence rewrites migration routes, Other discoveries push the boundaries of what humans could achieve, crossing open ocean waters long thought insurmountable, and reshaping our understanding of early global movement. Ancient seafaring and global links. Ancient seafaring might be among the biggest clues in rethinking how early humans moved around. On Crete, an island kept surrounded by water for about 5 million years, researchers actually found stone tools dated somewhere between 130,000 and 700,000 years ago. And because Crete was never joined to the mainland, whoever shaped those tools had to show up by boat, or, at least so it seems. That find sort of messes with the old narrative that early human relatives, like Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis, did not have the know-how for open water travel. Making that crossing, roughly 40 miles of sea, means they were perhaps more skillful, more adaptable, and maybe even more bold than we once assumed. If early humans could even manage to navigate the Mediterranean that soon, it kind of makes you wonder about migration in other places too, especially the Americas. Maybe some of the first groups didn't just rely on walking over frozen land bridges, you know? Maybe they also kept to coastlines instead, using small boats and sea-based resources to get by and survive. Now, genetic work gives this a bit more weight. There's one mitochondrial DNA lineage called D4H that points toward northern coastal China, and it implies two separate migration waves into the Americas. One would have happened around 26,000 years ago, likely by sea, and then a later one around 15,000 years ago, probably more landward. Those coastal travelers may have moved slowly along the Pacific Rim, stopping at camps rich in seafood from Asia all the way over toward North America. And there are also echoes in stone tool styles across East Asia, Japan, and North America, which feels like a cultural connection rather than pure coincidence. So taken together, the clues suggest early humans weren't only walkers, but navigators too. Waterways could have acted like ancient routes, moving people, tools, and ideas across the prehistoric world bit by bit. The discoveries from Oregon to California and beyond unravel centuries-old beliefs about human origins in the Americas. From ancient DNA preserved in caves to footprints frozen in deserts and tools crafted by unknown hands, the story is far richer and older than once thought. If these revelations fascinated you, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more journeys into the past. The next groundbreaking discovery is already waiting beneath the surface.